Living Day. So happy Independent Living Day, everyone. As every year, in the framework of the day, we do numerous activities at the meal, and we want to be proud, strong, and visible. So for this year, we selected to frame our activities around youth, around young disabled people, because it's also the European Year of Youth. And with that in mind, we organized today, at the moment, the first session of the day, which is titled Young Disabled Leaders and the Importance to be Involved in the Decision-Making Process. So we'll have a couple of very nice speakers and different perspectives and experiences. But before we start, let me very briefly say some house rules, so we are all on the same page. So, first of all, we have sign language interpretation and live captioning. The link to live captioning, you can see it on the chat in case you want to have it in external video, external window. But you can also click it, of course, through the Zoom link when you click the CC button. So you have two options for captioning. If you have any technical issues, my colleague Natasha Kokic is here and he will monitor the chat and everything. So feel free to ask her. And yeah, we will try to solve everything as soon as we can. What else do I need to tell before we start? The meeting is streamed. So some people are joining through Zoom. Some people will follow it through, I think it's streamed on YouTube, right, Natasha?
Yeah, on YouTube, and I will put it also on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay, so it's double streamed.
Yeah.
Which is better, the more people watch us, the best. And yeah, also, so we have streaming, we have captioning, we have sign language interpretation, and a bit less than 1 hour and a half with excellent speaker in front of us to discuss about youth leadership and about some very nice perspectives. So without further ado, I think I can pass the floor to our first speaker. I'm sorry, I forgot something. In case you have questions, feel free to use the chat and the Q&A box, which is on the menu below. Sorry, I forgot it earlier. So you can ask questions through the chat, through the Q&A box. And if we have time and yeah, it's burning, you will be also able to do it by raising your hand and asking the question verbally later. But we will come to the questions later. In the meantime, feel free to type anything you wish in the chat. So, okay, now I think I said everything. And yeah, let's start this European Independent Living Day with our first speaker, Dr. Miro Griffiths, who is a researcher in the disability studies at the University of Leeds in the UK. His research explores how young disabled people, experiences of activism and social movements. He is also a former board member of ENIL and one of the founding members of ENIL Youth Network. So, Miro, yeah, tell us about your research and about youth activism and about anything else you prepared for us to do. And good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Camille. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's wonderful to be with you all on this Independent Living Day, which is, I think, a reminder of how important it is that we as disabled people and as we as young disabled people have opportunities to articulate a message of hope, really, to all disabled people around the world, which is that there is another way of organizing society. There is another way of organizing society so that it is fair and safe and just, and importantly, it is an inclusive world. And I think that's a key issue that comes up a lot within my research, which is, why do young disabled people engage in activism and social movements? What's the point of engaging in disability activism? And I was between 2015 and 2019, I conducted research looking at how young disabled people in the UK engage in disability activism and social movements. And there was 3 key issues emerged. One was the opportunities for young disabled people to have decision-making power and authority and influence within disabled people's organizations, so DPOs that we sometimes refer to as well as opportunities to influence the broader plans and agendas within disability activism and disabled people's social movements. The other area was around the opportunity to learn more about key issues like independent living, because knowledge is important for having opportunities to take on leadership roles. Often we think about disability firstly from our own perspectives and our own individual experiences. But what's key is the opportunities like this, where we come together to discuss and learn and reflect on each other's experiences in order to then create key demands and strategies and agendas that have relevance to all disabled people in our local communities, as well as within our national countries, and of course in regions across the world and beyond. Because we are a collective and we are a marginalized community brought together because of our experiences of unnecessary restrictions that are imposed upon us. And part of the activism carried out by young disabled people is, in a way, trying to identify what are these unnecessary restrictions, as well as think through how to challenge these and how to ensure that we are moving beyond restrictions towards building an inclusive and accessible society. So this research ended in 2019, and it highlighted the key feelings of young disabled people wanting to participate more and wanting to have leadership opportunities within disabled people's networks and within disabled people's organizations. And there was a frustration felt by many young disabled people that their views are often trapped in just thinking about youth issues. So when they're invited to participate, they are assumed to only give perspectives that are rooted in issues that require a youth perspective. So this traps then young disabled people from being able to engage in the broader discussions and in the broader issues surrounding disabled people's inclusion in society. So one thing, when we think about decision-making processes and we think about the importance of young people as leaders, it's not just leaders within youth issues, it's leadership and decision-making across the whole spectrum of activity that goes on within disability activism and disabled people's social movements. It's how to influence the broader strategies around deinstitutionalization, not just deinstitutionalization for young people, but deinstitutionalization for all. Or when we think about how do we want to imagine support being provided to disabled people so that they can have choice and control and autonomy over how to organize their support. It's not just thinking about it in the perspective of young people, but disabled people across the life course and in different stages of their life. So the key question, I think, is how do we make sure that as young activists, we have opportunities to organize and have safe and accessible spaces to think through the important issues affecting young disabled people, but we also have opportunities as well to influence the broader programs and strategies that all disabled people are engaged in when trying to contest the marginalization that we experience and try to offer an alternative which is much more possible and preferable when it comes to thinking about accessibility and inclusion. And currently, so as I said, this research finished in 2019, and I'm now working on a new piece of research for the next few years. And this is looking at young disabled people's experiences of activism and social movements across Europe. And it's an opportunity to think through, how do young disabled people resist? Why are they resisting? What are they resisting? How do they resist? But also, what's the alternative? So it's an opportunity when we think about marginalization and oppression, and we think about the ways in which we challenge that as young disabled people. I think of this as resistance. It's a way of saying we no longer want to experience what is being done to us, often by state or by policies or by people in our community who hold very negative attitudes towards disabled people. This is the point of activism is an opportunity to resist and to think about the alternatives of articulating messages of hope, but also clear paths towards realizing inclusion and accessibility in society. So this research is an opportunity to think through, why do people engage in disability activism and what are they hoping for to achieve with their activism? And it has 4 parts to this research. So the first part was a survey, an online survey that was conducted last year. And we collected views of young disabled people, about 250 views of young disabled people across Europe, who were either interested or were currently engaged in disability activism. And it highlighted really interesting issues about where do they want to focus their activism and the importance of opportunities to make decisions and to influence the organizations that they are connected to. But there was also discussions about the barriers that people experience, young disabled people experience, key issues around the lack of support in order to participate in activism and political participation. There was issues with funding and finance in order to take part in projects and take part in spontaneous activism that emerges in their local areas. And there's also an issue of time as well. I think the issue of time is quite key to thinking through how to bring in more young disabled people into activism. Our lives are often quite hectic, either because of work or because of study or because of our own health needs and the fact that we may need to access different services and different individuals, or maybe our impairments mean that we need to have substantial periods of rest. So there's also a way about how do we imagine activism and opportunities to influence and have authority as young disabled people, taking into account the ways in which we also require assistance and support to do that. So the first, as I said, the first phase was an online survey. We're now moving towards doing interviews with young disabled people, where we can start to find out more information about people's experiences of being involved in activism and being involved in decision-making opportunities within disabled people's organizations. And if anybody's interested in taking part in the interviews or wants more information, you can contact me and I'd be happy to share some information with you. And then after the interviews, which will take place in the next couple of months, we'll then also be working alongside Enel with the Freedom Drive and thinking about some exciting opportunities at the Freedom Drive for young disabled people to take part in discussions about inclusion and accessibility. So at the moment, and there will be more information on this in the future, but at the moment, Enel is organizing some arts-based workshops during the Freedom Drive. And this will be an opportunity for young disabled people to attend these workshops and find out more information about taking part in activism. But it's also an opportunity and a space for young disabled people to express what do they mean by an inclusive society? What do we mean by accessibility? Because we spend so much time using these key terms, inclusive societies, accessible societies, socially just and fair worlds for us to live in. But what do we actually mean by that? And what do young disabled people mean by those terms? So during these workshops, it will be an opportunity to ask and support young disabled people to present their messages of what do we mean by inclusion? What do we mean by accessibility? And more importantly, how do we make sure that organizations across the world who are working on disability rights and disability activism, who are engaged in disabled people's inclusion, making sure that these organizations are taking into account and reflecting the ideas and the ideas of young disabled people. Because decision making is not just about, and leadership is not just about just making decisions on your own, but taking into account the ideas of others. And the question here is how do we make sure that young disabled people's views and experiences are taken into account, and they do inform strategies and agendas and the work plans of activist networks and organizations. So if you're interested in taking part in these workshops and having an opportunity to say what you think inclusion and accessibility means for yourself, but also for the world, then I'd really encourage you to find out more information when Enor presents some information about the Freedom Drive, and there will be information coming on that. And finally, the last phase of the research is a documentary film that we'll be producing. And again, more information on this will come out shortly. But I would really encourage you that if you are interested in being part of this documentary, that you can contact me, or you can contact Camille, and we can provide you some more information. And this documentary film will be a way of capturing what does youth activism mean for disabled people? How do young disabled people take part in activism? Because I think film and documentary is a way of also telling people outside of disability why is disability activism important? Because ultimately, and this is my last point really, when we think about the importance of activism, disability activism, it's not just important to disabled people, it's also important for everybody. Because what we're arguing for is a world which is more inclusive and accessible for everybody. And this means that it will not just benefit disabled people, but it will also benefit other communities as well. And this is why it's essential that when we think about leadership in disability activism, when we think about the demands and the agendas that we're trying to argue for and realize, we want to make sure that we are building allies and we are building connections with other communities who are experiencing marginalization as well. Because when you think about care and support, that doesn't just mean care and support for disabled people, it also means support for everybody in the world so that they can have opportunities to have choice and control over their lives. Now, I will be leaving before the Q&A because I have to go and do some teaching at my university. So I'm happy to take questions now, but again, if you would like some time to think about some questions, you can always email me afterwards, and Camille has my contact details as well. But I'll hand back to Camille now.
Thanks a lot, Miro. Thank you for this very interesting presentation on activism, on your research, on the different phases, and also how we connect, the activism also with leadership. And yeah, I mean, I definitely invite people to join your workshop during the Freedom Drive. It will be really nice platform to exchange experiences and also share information and learn stuff. So definitely stay tuned on our social media and our pages, because nice things will happen. And in general, the research of Miro is very interesting in every stage. As Miro said, he will have to leave a bit earlier. So in case people you have questions, feel free to type them, anytime from now. Or, we can take one or two more speakers. And if there is question for Miro in between the speakers, we can come back to that. So without further ado, and because I don't see any questions at the moment, I will go to our next speaker at the moment, who is Miroslava Mima Ivanovic, who is a very active disability movement activist in Montenegro, a young person, of course. She co-founded the Initiative for Youth with Disabilities of BOCA, which is where she is also executive director. And yeah, she does a lot of other very active things in her country. But apart of that, Mima is also the co-vice chair of the Annual Youth Network board. And we are very proud to have her as our co-vice chair. Mima will talk about the reasons. Mima will touch a different approach. So Mima will talk about the reasons for the decrease of leadership and enthusiasm of disabled youth in developed countries. And yeah, it is to be seen whether COVID would be a cause of even more passivity or not. So Mima, is it correct? This is what we will you talk about. The floor is yours. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Camille, for this great introduction. You said correctly what I will talk about. And it's my pleasure to be part of this event. And happy European Independent Living Day to all persons with disabilities, but also to persons without disabilities, because independent living is something which is important for every person in the Europe and the world. As Camille said, I am, let's say, young person with disability, woman with disability. Actually, when it comes to Montenegrin legal framework, I exceeded the age, the age, let's say, border for youth, because I'm 32 years old, and considering the Montenegrin legal framework, but I think regarding regarding majorities of legal frameworks in Europe, the age border for youth population is 30 years old. It's 30 years, so I exceeded. So there are 2 years that actually I'm not anymore young. And but I'm still active in disabled youth movement and also disabled movement in my country and in Europe. But what I can say that actually I started to be active in disability movement in Montenegro, where when I was very young, I had I was just 17 years old, and I was encouraged with my older colleagues, not much older. They also were young. They also were under 30 or actually around 30 years old. And actually we were all almost all youth. And we encourage each other to fight more for our personal rights and for rights of other young adult persons with disabilities. We inspire each other. And so I can say that I'm disability activist almost 15 years, but during these 15 years, I saw that in generations which come, there are always less and less youth with disabilities who want to be active in disability movement. When I started to be disability rights activist, there were something around 10 very strong disability activists who were young. And now we have only a few of them who have such enthusiasm we had at that time, so before 15 years. But when I discussed with my inner colleagues about that issue, which I realized, actually they said that there is the similar problem, especially in developed countries, because actually youth with disabilities there had everything guaranteed, because actually older generations fight it and actually get more freedom, let's say, get a broader scope of human rights, and new young generations of persons with disabilities haven't had a need to fight for their freedom, for their human rights. And they received everything they needed to be active in the society that was guaranteed. Let's say everything. Actually, we do not have, let's say, fully inclusion in the world. There is no country with full inclusion of persons with disabilities, but we have now much more than we had before 30 years, for example, especially in developed countries. And the problem is that actually those young generations of persons with disabilities that they didn't have an opportunity to experience the struggle for human rights. So they are not, let's say, not educated, but they actually don't know what is the struggle and fight for human rights, what means to win a freedom. And that's the reason why they are more passive than the generations of youth with disabilities were before 30 or 50 years. But for example, Montenegro is not a developed country, and the disability movement in line with the human rights approach to disability was established 20 years ago. And we also see that here, youth with disabilities are not so active as my generation and older generation who encouraged me to be a disability activist were. We also see that many disability activists who were very enthusiastic when they were young now are, let's say, more realistic, they would say, and they do not have such passion in fighting for their and rights of others. But that's not a problem. Actually, we all change ourselves during the years. But the problem is what will happen with next generations and how much strong disability activists we will have. Coronavirus crisis, as every crisis, was an opportunity to see where we are and what we have to fight for our freedom as a disability community. In every fight, the role of youth is essential. Actually, in such situation where we were unable to enjoy even those very small scopes of rights, we were completely excluded from the society as disabled people, especially youth with disabilities. Actually, from every crisis, you can exit as a winner or as a loser. Let's say it, but no winner and loser as usually those terms are used, but winner and loser as a personality. So you can learn something from that situation, or you can just be more passive than you were before it. I'm afraid that in my country, but also in Europe, the coronavirus crisis influenced that youth with disabilities are even more passive than before it, although it could encourage youth with disabilities to be more enthusiastic and to say, oh, this violation of our human rights is obvious and it's horrible. We have to do something. We have to fight for our human rights. We have to win freedom, which we lost. But unfortunately, I'm not sure whether it will happen. Although, additionally, there are more arguments towards need of disability inclusion, as almost all persons in the world experience what does it mean to be actually blocked in your house. What does it mean when you are neglected, and when you cannot exercise your basic freedoms such as movement and so on. So there is a big space of mutual understanding which can be used in our disability rights activism. But the question is whether youth with disabilities will be able to do that, especially new generations. There are three very important things that we have to think about when we talk about disability youth activism. First one is that actually we have to win a freedom. Doesn't matter without taking into account what generations before us have done. That was actually fact which was shown by coronavirus crisis, that nothing is guaranteed, that everything can change in one moment, and that all generations have to be ready to fight for their human rights and freedoms. So that's what we have to say to new youth with disabilities, to be aware of this fact, so they would be able to understand how much their enthusiasm and their activism is important for them personally, and for them as a group, and for new generations. Everything we succeeded in disability rights, we succeeded thanks to enthusiasm of youth with disabilities. The other thing is that many youth with disabilities are tired from waiting their possibility to exercise fully their human rights and freedoms. They want everything now, but that's not possible, and that's not realistic. In my country, there is a very big number of persons with disabilities and their family members who are tired to wait, tired from waiting that rights defined by the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities could be realized. But we cannot wait, actually. We have to win our rights. There is nobody who will come and give us our rights. Actually, the last thing, which is very important, and it's not maybe last thing, but it's that we as older we can lose our enthusiasm related to struggle for human rights, for freedoms, and so on. But we cannot lose our enthusiasm to encourage new generations of youth with disabilities to do what we have done. So to continue where we stopped. It is very important because many of older, let's say, persons with disabilities think that youth with disability, that they were unrealistic when they were young, and that now they are more realistic, and that they will, let's say, encourage, that they should encourage youth with disabilities to be more realistic and to not, let's say, be so much enthusiastic and so on. I don't want to say that many youth with disabilities who are and who were disability activists and who are still disability activists sometimes and very often actually are not realistic, but that characteristic is useful very often, because without it you will not have any enthusiasm to change your life and life of others. And one more thing which came now in my mind, which is maybe the most important, is that there is no fight for your personal human rights and freedoms. What targets me, that's the same what targets other person with similar disability. So there is no individual work in disability rights advocacy. Everything I experienced will be experienced or is already experienced by another person with disability. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nima. Thanks a lot for this very insightful and different speech than we are used to hear. You tackled an issue which is a real issue at the moment, and we see it now even in big disability organizations, there is lack of continuation, lack of leadership. And yeah, so thank you for bringing this up. I see also a connection to what you said, to what Dr. Miro Griffiths said earlier about the activism and the importance of activism, of disability activism. Unfortunately, Miro had to leave because he has to teach in his university. He left his email in the chat in case you want to reach him and in case you have comments or questions. I think there was one question for Miro and he replied it in the chat, so we are okay. Yeah, feel free people to ask questions to Mima, and yeah, even to Miro, we can give them later. In the meantime, I see there is a raised hand. Yeah, I think we can take the question now. If there is urgent, or we can go to the speakers and take the question in the Q&A later. I don't see the hand raised anymore, so I will assume it's not urgent. And in that case, we leave it to the discussion afterwards, if we agree. If not, please type in the chat that it's burning question. In the meantime, I will go to our next speaker, so we can move with our program. Normally it would be Clementine Willow Dufendans, again the Youth Network board member, but unfortunately she doesn't feel well today. She contacted us some minutes before the event, and of course health is a priority. So she will probably not join. Maybe she will join at the later stage. But yeah, I mean now she's not able to be with us. So we will go to the next person in the agenda, which is Nina Portolan from Serbia. And Nina, first of all, welcome. Is a former Nina is a former European Solidarity Corps volunteer at the NIR, and she has been very active in the field of disability rights since 2019. She is part of an informal youth disability rights initiative in Serbia and a para karate athlete who works with children. And I think this is a different perspective today we bring when we talk about leadership and about how young disabled people can be the change. So Nina will be talking about her experiences when she first started speaking about disability rights, building her identity as an activist and leader, and for the possibility to setting the path for other young people, which is always very important. Nina, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Camille. I'm so happy to be here today, and happy Independent Living Day to everyone. As you could hear from Camille, my perspective today is a little bit different from what others have said, but I think it matches beautifully with what Mima previously said, because I am actually the generation that comes after. So I can provide a perspective of what the road to activism and making change is like for my generation and those that will come after. For reference for everyone, I'm 25 years old now, and I first started thinking about joining some sort of activist group when I was only 15 years old. And this start of my activism journey and building this identity is actually very clearly split into three parts because of these thinking processes I had. First, before 2019, I was looking for a different perspective, and I was searching ever since I was 15 years old for something different, because at the time, all I knew were disability organizations based on a certain diagnosis with a very medicalized approach. And usually people who were chairs of those organizations were not interested in the perspective of young people. With this being said, I didn't really know much about how to start my own journey, and karate, which I started training back in 2016, was actually, interestingly, the first thing that gave me space to speak. I had a lot of frustration with how things were during my competitions, how other able-bodied athletes viewed disabled athletes, and so on and so on. And as Miro said, that's something that still prevails with young people. In 2018, I had my first opportunity to speak when one of our famous karate athletes here in Serbia invited me to a panel, and that snowballed my future path, I think. In 2019, I participated in a study session in the youth center in Strasbourg, which was dedicated to disabled people and mental health. At the time, Emil was also one of the organizers, and this is the time where I start soaking it all in, learning everything I can and building who I am as an activist. I didn't call myself an activist before then. I didn't even understand what that could mean. But during 2019 and 2020, when I was a volunteer at INU, I started to realize who I am and who I want to be in relation to disability rights. This provided a lot of opportunities, but also showed me how much I yet have to learn. And with the little knowledge I had, I wanted to network with other people. So it was a great opportunity that Radoš Jaravica, who is also a member of INIL, wanted to initiate a youth initiative in 2021, Impact 21. We networked with other disabled people in the country to see if we share some ideas how we can change the perspective and change the narrative that is, in my opinion, in Serbia still very medicalized, and independent living is not something that is talked about a lot. It is presumed that disabled people are still very dependent on their families, and also institutionalization is a big issue. I had, again, because of being an athlete, a slightly different perspective. My focus was until then very highly on my personal experiences from being excluded as an athlete. And some of my initial speeches at that time were complete failures because I still didn't know how to merge those two perspectives. I was talking to athletes and senior officials in sports often to give other disabled people the space to do sports, because as I assume some of you know, sports is actually covered by Article 13 of the UNCRPD, so it's not something that is too far removed. One of my speeches in 2021 was a failure because I couldn't express myself, and this is something that brought back the struggles from the initial road. Am I good enough? Are the older generation going to listen? And is it enough what I'm doing? And is it enough what I know? The youth initiative we started, Impact 21, brought some fresh ideas, and it gave me the energy after my ESC arrangement with INIL was over to continue. One of the other things that was also very important to me was something my sensei, my karate teacher, often says, and that is that we should respect the perspective of young people because they can always bring more. And with that in mind, I started working with younger children, and I see now in them what I didn't have growing up. So they see me as their role model. They see me as what they could become when they're older, and this makes me happy because this might be what changes the narrative, what makes them think that they can change the future and gives them the energy Mima was mentioning before to actually have the patience to wait for things to change. Finally, I want to leave you here today with one sentence that I always bring up when I'm a guest somewhere, because it shaped who I am. When we lose faith in what we're doing, such as I lose faith when I see empty stands when I'm performing in sports, and so on, So my sensei said something. If you have 1,000 people in a room watching you, and before you are done, 997 will leave because they do not care or do not see your message, you can still continue what you're doing and change the perspective of the 3 who stayed. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, for this very, let me say it, inspirational, because in this case it was, speech, and for the nice quotes in the end also, and the nice messages. It was very, very nice to have these different perspectives. And in general, it's very nice that we have today a lot of different perspectives, from research to the sports perspective and engagement in the community and all these things. So it is a pleasure. Thank you, Nina, for that.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, it's very nice to see that a so young person, is continuing and is doing new things and evolving in different areas. And this is what we need. Also what we must attend. So this is great. Now I will move to our final speaker, and then we will have Q&A and discussion. In that case, I would like to welcome Loredana Dixie, the Membership Internal Communication and Youth Officer of the European Disability Forum, and a good friend of mine as well, as everyone here, of course. And Loredana, I want also to thank her a bit more because she's substituting last minute another person who was not able to represent the EDF Youth Committee. So this is even more kudos to Loredana for her availability and for stepping in. Loredana is very active in the youth field when it comes to disabled people. She is supporting the Youth Committee of the European Disability Forum and will tell us about the work of the EDF Youth Committee, what the European Disability Forum does, to advance the youth leadership, youth involvement, and anything else, Loredana, you wish to share with us. Welcome again, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you so much. And let me say that, so I'm in the office in Brussels, but I'm not living in Brussels. I'm living in Leuven, which is a kind of half an hour by train. So I am myself almost blind, and I'm so happy today. Most of the time when I'm coming, I took the bus, I took the train, and I came here alone. So this is just to say happy Independent Living Day, because it's so fantastic to be able to come whenever you want. And this I say whenever I want, because it's a way, it's trip I'm doing quite regularly, so I don't need to take assistance now. If I was to take an assistance, it would have been a different thing, because maybe I was lucky and they could assist me. But in Belgium now, you have to announce them that you need assistance on the local trip 3 hours in advance. Which is again impossible because the assistance center works from 7 to I think 9:30 in the evening. So if you announce in the morning at the first hour, the earliest you could leave, it's at 10 o'clock, which of course makes that you are not on time at your work if you don't know it in ahead that you need to come that day. But that was just to highlight the importance of your movement and of our movement, because I'm with you, I'm part of it, I'm supporting you, and that's so important. Don't leave it, continue, go ahead, and that's so important. It was so great to hearing the interesting interventions before, and thank you, Nina, for your great enthusiasm. Mima, the enthusiasm does not die. We still have some people to keep it alive, and that's so important. So be contagious, Nina, and pass on to like spread it even faster than COVID. I think that's very important in this case, to get all of us this enthusiasm. Now, I came from the youth movement, let's say young people with disability movement, because if I'm here today, it's thanks to a volunteering project I did back in 2005. And only when I started to work here at EDF, I realized that I was involved in activism and I didn't know. And that's something important to see, to perceive, because I think lack of information is also a factor that influences activism of young people with disabilities. Because you can do things, and I will come up with certain things what we are doing at the European Disability Forum. First of all, our organization, which is yours as well, because Enil is a member, and you as Enil Youth, you are part of Enil, so you are part of EDF, and that's so great to see such a big family. As one of the youth committee members always says, Mathieu, we are a big European family, and that's important not to forget it. So first of all, at EDF, we have, since its existence, or quite early in its existence, the organization decided to have a dedicated committee that focuses on young people. Now, that's fantastic, but it's not enough. And why I'm saying it's not enough, and it is to all of you young people to fight up, how does it happen in your organizations? Okay, you are in the youth movement, and afterwards, what does it happen? Is there a continuation? Is there something that happens? You were maybe chairing the committee. Do you go further in your organization, in the Enil, or not? Sometimes maybe you need to wait years that the others are finished their mandates, their work, or that they nominate you, that they trust enough in your capacity. And that's something that should change from my point of view. And that is also something you can make, change it. Shout for it. Don't let yourself say it. You want to be part. Young people is not the future, but young people, you are now. You want to be part today, not tomorrow, not in 1 year, 10 years. It's now that you are living, and you need to be part of the movement now. So the youth committee in EDF is giving input and in policies. In the beginning, it was said only in the youth-related policies. I always say no. Why? Those policies interests also, not only if they are youth-related, all of them, because they are part of your life. Artificial intelligence will affect also your life. Another, how green we want to live. It's also about your how we look the earth in the future. So that's also related, important for you, and all of it, everything that is discussed at EU level, it is important for you, for anyone, even for the child that is born this morning. So the youth committee give input in this, but also represents EDF in different big youth events. We have organized last year, and we had the pleasure to have Mima with us in an important event, the Fundamental Rights Forum, organized by the Fundamental Rights Agency. They had also a focus on young people, and it was great to be there and to share our points of view. And it was on independent living, by the way. Our youth committee is part of several important things, like the stakeholders group on the European Year of Youth. So this is a group that is together with the Commission and with other important EU institutions that are present, and many other organizations, to ensure that our views, our issues like accessibility, involvement to include young people with disabilities is part of it. Because like anyone else, you have the right to participate in what happens in the EU. So besides the work of the Youth Committee, that is doing a fantastic work every year, and that they meet and they are present in several other events, conferences, and the European Day of Persons with Disabilities, which is an event that EDF, our organization, the European Disability Forum, is co-organizing with the Commission. We have EDF responds also to different youth policies that are ongoing. What does concretely mean? For example, maybe you know, if you participated in youth exchanges, or Nina, who volunteered, these are some programs that the European Union dedicates to young people. And these programs have been reviewed. So the new programs entered into force this year. And that means that beforehand they were, the text of that program, how is going to look, everything, it was discussed at different EU levels. First, the European Commission, who published how they thought it will look like, then the Parliament, who took it and looked at it and gave their view, of course, and then afterwards the Council of Europe. But the civil society, which means this is us, all the organizations, so EDF, we participated in too, we took this publication and we looked at it, and we included things that are relevant for people with disabilities. And how did we know what is relevant? Because we heard from people who went on an Erasmus to study that were blocked because there was no assistance for them. Or one of your volunteers at Enil, who had, instead of daily assistance, what he or she needed, that person got only 35 hours assistance. And what about the weekends when that person didn't have? This is not okay. And we said that, and we said it needs to be addressed and it needs to be included in the program. So these are some aspects where we can have a say in it. And I'm happy that at the end, measures that were, for example, in the Solidarity Corps, now they are also in the Erasmus, for example, to organize a planning visit, a preparatory visit, as they call it now, ahead of the project, also in Erasmus. It was so useful in the volunteering one, because you come and you want to stay for a longer period, for your study or your traineeship. And that helps to see what do you still need? What does your organization or your university still need to do? So now this is something that was that is in the whole program, also in Erasmus. But also one important thing that is an issue is the pre-financing, because before, when you went on an Erasmus as a student, in some cases, you needed to advance the money and then they would reimburse you. But when you have to pay your assistance, that's already a couple of thousands of euros that you don't have. So now in the new program, you can ask for pre-financing this cost to receive that money ahead so that you can pay and you can participate in your project. These are just a couple of things to illustrate how important is shaping how the programs look. We still have problems because, for example, another important program for young people with disability, for young people in general, it is the Youth Guarantee. This is a new program that allows young people to get a first job experience or traineeship, or you get money to continue to develop your skills, to take an extra training or studies. But in many countries, the issue is they say, oh, well, no problem. You can, yes, sure, you get the money, but then you can't have and your disability allowance and that money, and you need to choose. And who is going to choose for something that you get for 4 months and what happens afterwards? So it's discriminating, and this is something that we are still fighting, and we are not going to let it go like that. We will say it until it will be solved. But of course, for that, we need always to know which are the changes that should happen. We need from the grassroots, we need from you and you and you to know what is not working, what is working. And it's even stronger when in the parliament comes a young person to say that, and that young persons are standing for it. And this is how it works. So a little bit, the youth committee works like that, but just it is also very important. I would like to say some of the things the youth committee and the youth working happens at EDF, where you can also take part in it. We are answering also often consultations. I don't know if you know what they are. So the EU, the Commission in this case, often launches, they are kind of surveys, and they want to know, for example, now there is one ongoing about traineeship. I will try to find the link and put in the chat, but if I don't find it right now, I will send it to Camille and Natasha, and they can send it to you. So these surveys can be answered by anyone, any EU citizens. So this is something where you can have a say, and believe me that they are taken. And also you can just simply send also to us, because EDF as organization, we will take it to the Commission, because we know it's not okay that when you go on a traineeship somewhere and you need personal assistant next to you during your work, it's not okay that that one is not taken into account. The costs of that, there is not support for such a thing. And what about sometimes even not for the assistive technology you would need, or the mobility issue, like you would need if the public transport is not accessible to take a taxi, you would need to pay it from your own pocket. And it's not correct, because the other trainees would not have this extra cost. So this is something where you can also bring your input and make things change. And then there are several initiatives. For example, I don't know if you are aware, it has just finished. It will, in fact, now in a couple of days with the Europe's Day. So there was this big initiative to consult the citizens, all European institutions were involved, the Conference on the Future of Europe, they called it pompously. And there, I want to tell you that 20 points, I don't know how many are in total, in 20 points in the concluding things, they are brought things related to the disability. And that's very important, because all these were ideas that were entered by other people with disabilities or people working around, like policy people or DPOs, Disability People Organization. So they are now part of that, and the EU will have to do something around that. And now Camille said in the beginning that this event is also in the framework of the European Year of Youth. I want to let you know that this continues. You can still bring ideas, you can still say what you want to be improved. There is a whole portal on the youth portal. There is a whole page dedicated to the European Year of Youth, where you can include your views. And I really advise, and also what came out during this webinar, bring it up and put it down and bring it up to the EU institutions to make sure that you, I'm saying you because unfortunately I am I can't consider myself anymore young age-wise, but you can request that you need to be included. You should be part of the movement, of the youth movement in general. Join the youth movement, your youth movement locally, nationally, on European level, and be part of it, because this is essential. And one last thing I want to encourage you. At EDF, we are working also within several projects, and one of them next week is the final event, but you can still bring in ideas, and we will make sure that those ideas are part also of the European Year of Youth, that they come in the conclusions, and that the European institutions, Commission, Parliament, and Council will have to work on it. So I will put in the chat afterwards the website. You can include your ideas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, as many ideas as you have, things that you want to change. Be audacious and dream, because a dream always can become a reality if you want to make it a reality. And I want to thank you for this opportunity. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And I want to encourage you to be part of the movement. Ask what you want for. Don't lose your enthusiasm. Be assured that young people are to be part of the movement now and not tomorrow, but you need to work for it, because unfortunately the others will not necessarily do it, and it is to you. And take around you those people who want to support you and make a change of it and be part of the movement. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Loredana. Thanks a lot for this great speech and for, explaining also the work, not only of the European Disability Forum Youth Committee, but also of the European structures and how can young disabled people be engaged and be involved. Really appreciate that. Thanks a lot. I will keep the sentence you said in the end to people, be part of the movement, be active. This is very important. So, yeah, so with that, I want to thank Loredana, Nina, Mima, and Miro, all of them who spoke. I think each of the perspectives was different, but equally interesting. That was our goal, to have different but interesting perspective when it comes to young disabled people. Unfortunately, we couldn't have one of our speakers today because, this is live, and sometimes doesn't go as programmed with webinars. It just, it is how it is. But we wish Clementine a very quick recovery. So now we have a little bit less than 15 minutes for discussion, Q&A, and any final input someone would like to ask. I see there is a question / remark from Rados. I don't know, Rados, would you like to say it verbally or should I read it? Rados, by the way, is one of NL board members and founding member of the NL Youth Network. And Rados, I see you already in the screen. So I guess you can take the floor and elaborate a bit also on what you.
Thanks, Camille. I was struggling how to unmute, but I got the notification that I'm unmuted. So
I did it.
Thanks for doing it. I was wondering about the claims that young people are not that active nowadays, because when I was recruiting young people in England and Serbia for my research, I got to social media and I was looking for people who are active on social media because that was the way how I was recruiting them. And I noticed that many people are actually kind of social media influencers. They're using range of social media from TikTok to Instagram to producing really nice and interesting content, witty, humorous, to challenge the ableist attitudes or maybe to raise the awareness of impairment effects. So they're not necessarily framing their activism in terms of human rights, in terms of independent living, in terms of disabling barriers, but they do use these channels to communicate their messages to the wider audience, and they're not necessarily part of DPOs. They're not integrated part of the movement. So I'm wondering, there's so many young people out there, and I was quite positively surprised, but yet at the same time disappointed that they go under our radar. And it seems to me that we have to do better outreach and to think how to integrate them efficiently. So when I was beginning my activism route, I was facing the same comments of the older generation saying that young people are not that passive as we were, like we were very active and very oriented towards social change, but now it's a new generation is passive. So I think we shouldn't fall into the same trap, but try to think about the things that have changed. For example, in the course of one generation, like so much change in terms of social media. Like I'm not using TikTok, I'm not using so many options, Reels on Instagram that these people are using. So yeah, I'm thinking, do others have idea like how to reach out to those people and how to integrate them into the community of independent living? And we do activism in a very structured way. We participate in consultations, in policy making processes, and that's not something that it's appealing to young people. They perceive it that they need high level of competence, that the CRPD is reserved for elite group of people who are very skilled in it and understand it thoroughly. So yeah, it seems that our worlds are
parallelly going.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking, do you have any ideas like how to mitigate that?
Thank you, Rados.
Certainly going and trying to adjust. And I know EDF also last year opened an Instagram account just to make, but we don't have yet a TikTok, and I don't have TikTok, so I should try and yeah, move and follow the youth movement in that way. I think that's also something that policy people certainly should do if we want to get content and have young people on our side. We should also try and reach that level and go connect to those channels, I would say.
Yes. Thank you, Loredana. Totally agree. We should go to reach people in the spaces they are at the moment. And yeah, it's not so that sometimes it's not easy because we have the conventional ways. But yeah, the generations are different, and yeah, so it's important. I see Simone raised his hand, so I assume Simone would like to say something on the topic. So maybe Natasha, we can give permission to Simone. Simone, I think you can speak, but you need to unmute.
It's fine. Normally,
Yeah. I see him on the screen, but you are muted, Simone. Now you are.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Activism is very important, but we have different situation in the world, and for me is important one question: what services does the EU offer to IDPs, disabled IDPs from Ukraine? Because the convention obliges us to help them, and we haven't full information about services, and it is very important issue for me today. We have some services, but in different countries is really different situations, and so I think the information is important.
Thank you, Simone, for raising this point. We have relatively limited time. Of course, I will give the floor to someone if there is anyone wanting to reply to that. But before that, just want to say that today at 3 o'clock, we will have a second webinar, which will be dedicated to children with disabilities from Ukraine institutions. Where are they now and what will they return to? So I think this is very interesting for what you mentioned, and I totally encourage you to register and to follow that. We can put the link also in the chat. I think it's about what you said now, and I think there will be dedicated space to discuss what you raised now. Of course, if there is anyone from the speakers who would like to say very briefly something now, like in 1-2 minutes, I see Loredana is ready.
Yes.
Yeah, Loredana, go on, please.
Yes, I would just, I will put in the chat. EDF has a web page dedicated to everything that happens in Ukraine. So concretely how their DPOs can request help, who can help, and then in the surrounding countries also, which are the services available with links and everything. So specifically also on persons with disabilities, and then also in other EU countries. So we have a little bit all put together all this information. And for our for EDF members, we do have every Thursday there is a coordination meeting around the Ukrainian situation. So I hope this answers a little bit. So I will go and pick up the webpage and will put it in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Loredana. And thanks also to Natasha. She posted on the chat the link for the webinar we have in the evening. From what we see, it will be a very strong and popular webinar with a lot of people showing very high interest. I encourage you to follow it. I think you will really hear some very strong messages. So, okay, since we still have a couple of minutes, let me see the chat. I see there was a message from Barbara Glitis. I don't know, Barbara, if you wish to elaborate verbally, or maybe should I read about it? It was addressed to Nina. Dana also posted something now, in case guys you wish to, to learn more. So let me see the chat. Sorry, I tried to multitask. Barbara says it's okay, which means?
Just to say to Barbara, I have
okay.
read the message and thank you.
Okay, so yeah, Barbara wrote something for Tulina, and she said about sharing also the failures and the key moments where activism started to be possible, and that working in the Salto European Solidarity Core Resource Center, we see that young people in general are very active online and directly in communities. I will not read the rest of the message, since it seems that with Nina they already discussed it, but just want to say that Salto is doing a very good job, and thank you for what you do for engaging young people and young disabled people recently more and more. That's very important. We know that sometimes it still doesn't work very well. With Nina, for example, we have discussed the issues where certain national agencies doesn't support disabled people participating in Salto events, which is a problem. So yeah, maybe we can discuss it at some other point. Unfortunately, not now because we don't have the time. And then I see one more message from Bori. Bori says, I think maybe it takes time for young disabled people to find their voice and to join or lead activist movements. In my perspective, I met a new and very different perspective from medical model of disability, same situation as Nina said, when I was 25, and it took me 3-4 years to find the way, what movement I'd like to join or create in my country, which is Hungary. Now I'm turning 30, and I feel too old to create activist movements. It's difficult to find funding for our projects if you are not a youth group now. Thank you for sharing this experience, Bori. I don't know if anyone would like to comment very quickly on that. From my perspective, I want to say it's never too late. And indeed, it might be difficult because, as you say, if you are not young, sometimes there's less opportunities. But I think there is still ways to do that. And I will give the floor very quickly if anyone wants to comment on that. Otherwise, we will slowly close our webinar. I see Loredana.
Yes, I would just like to confirm, as Camille said, it's never too late. Even if you are involved, let's say funding is not available, but there is always, and if not, you can create locally your movement that you can involve it in the national level and so on, reach further. You should, the funding, I know funding it's essential, but it shouldn't stop you, even though, because I can tell you can do also certain things even without funding now that social media is quite accessible to many of us. I know not to everyone, but quite you can reach quite far out with that. And I would be interested to hear, I mean, even not necessarily now because it's not here the place, but about the issues with Salto not being able to join trainings because of the national agency. So I would be interested to hear that story. If I don't know, you want to tell Camille? Yes.
If because this was my story, Camille, and I can reach out to you later.
Perfect. That's very good because we should address that. I think it would be important because it's not. It doesn't go well with the inclusion part of the of the program. So
yes.
Thank you.
No, it does not, and it was quite an uncomfortable experience. But hopefully, we can discuss this later. And
yes, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. I see 2 comments. I will read them very quickly. One is from Barbara from Santo, who says thank you for the comment on how not being able to attend. I'll pass that on my NA colleagues and how we can do better. Thank you, Barbara. We might reach to you as well and see whether we can join forces and allow young people like Nina, for example, to be able to participate, because nowadays it's kind of discriminatory. But that's for another time because we don't have time. And I will kindly ask our interpreters for 1 more minute for a very quick question I see now from Beverly, who says, not everybody is on social media. How do you plan to reach people who do not use social media? So if there's anyone who would like in 1 minute to answer that, how do we plan to reach people who are not on social media? If not, we can brainstorm it and think it afterwards. But I want to give 1 minute if anyone would like to answer this.
I would say certainly via our local members. So each of our organization has members and members of their members, and this is certainly a way that can be done via the grassroots organizations.
Thank you, Loredana. Thank you. Very good point. And now I think we are done. Thank you. Thanks a lot for all your time. Thanks a lot for the work of our sign language interpreters and of our captioner. I want also to apologize for the 3 minutes prolonging of the time, but there were questions and the engagement of people, which I think is very nice. So I really appreciate the help and the support of everyone, the enthusiasm of speakers, the enthusiasm of participants, and the enthusiasm of our interpreters who are always here to support us and our captioner. So thanks a lot. Have a nice European independent living today. Be loud and proud. Join our activities. Follow the hashtag ELDay 2022. No, ELDay 22. Sorry, ELDay 22. And let's be in touch. And let's be active. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you also, Natasha, for the practical support. And let's be in touch. Have a nice day, everyone. Have a nice day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.